The ground trembled under the iron feet of Rocinante, each step shaking the loose, broken stone of Scotland's northern roads. Smoke hung low over the valley, mixing with the bitter scent of burning fuel and churned earth. The gray skies above seemed unwilling to weep for the land below, for the last of the Scottish barrels had already been smashed aside by the advancing German forces. Their mechanized beasts and bioengineered horrors had torn through every line set before them, and now only a scattered few stood to resist. Through the haze, the flash of muzzle fire bloomed bright, tracers cutting jagged lines through the smoke. Bullets pinged and sparked against Rocinante's thick armor plating, glancing blows that left scorched marks but failed to slow its relentless advance. Hydraulic limbs hissed and groaned as the mech pressed forward, each thunderous step carrying Sir William Erskine deeper into the fray. His autocannon roared, a steady rhythm of destruction that spat hot lead into the ranks of the enemy. Shapes flitted through the smoke, German advance squads in blackened armor, their rifles barking futilely against the mech's iron hide. Somewhere beyond, larger shadows moved. Something bigger, something worse. But Sir William paid it no mind. Not yet. First, the line had to hold. Sir William, reporting in. I have dealt with the first of the enemy dregs. I am pushing forward. Scout party, report in. The mech shuddered, and its shoulder-mounted machine gun chattered, shredding a nest of machine gunners hidden in the ruins of an old farmhouse. A plume of flame and debris blossomed skyward, scattering the remains like so much chaff. The ground was slick with mud and blood. The old fields of northern Scotland now a killing ground. Over the radio, voices snapped and crackled, distorted by interference of jamming signals in the sheer chaos of the battle. Sir William adjusted a dial, his gauntleted hand steady even as another volley struck Rocinante's chestplate, sending a shudder through the cockpit. Flanks are heavy, sir. They're bringing in walkers, smaller class, but fast. William's eyes narrowed behind his visor. Walkers, light mechs, nimble and armed with autocannons of their own. They'd be trying to encircle, to harry him from the sides, while the infantry pinned him from the front. Classic German maneuver. He ground his teeth, feeling the old fury rising in his chest like a storm. Rocinante answered the threat with a grinding turn, servos whining as the mech pivoted to unleash its fury. It stomped forward, the autocannon chewing through the squad attempting to cross open ground, while a secondary missile pod fired a short, brutal volley into the tree line where the walkers lurked. Explosions ripped the earth apart, dirt and metal flung sky high as screams echoed through the valley. Smoke swallowed the battlefield once more, and through it, William pressed on. His mech's iron feet stamped out the last of the machine gun's nest, as he moved to regroup with his remaining lance. Battered but unbroken, the ground ahead still writhed with enemy shapes, and beyond them, darker figures loomed. The German war machine had only just begun to show its teeth. The village loomed ahead, a crumbling shadow in the midst of a ruin. The once peaceful town of Glenmach was now a battlefield, its cobbled streets lined with detritus of war. Buildings that had once stood proud were now jagged silhouettes against the gray sky, crumbled into rubble or burning, a testament to the German advance. William's mech took the lead, crushing the debris beneath its feet as it moved forward, the ground trembling with each step. From the corner of his visor he could see the faintest hint of movement. the shadows of armored shapes cutting through the smoke. The sound that followed was unmistakable. The grinding, whining growl of German panzers, advancing with deliberate force. Even in a mech like Rocinante, those beasts were a problem. Their heavy cannons, designed specifically to counter British mechs, could punch through armor like a hot knife through butter. But Sir William wasn't concerned. Not yet. Not until he had drawn their fire and given his lance a chance to capitalize on it. The panzers would fall just as the infantry had, with precision and ruthless calculation. Hamish, bring that old war dog around. I'll draw them in. You clean them up. Get in close.
Aye, sir. I'll show the lads how it's done.
Rocinante shifted its weight as it charged ahead, aiming for the heart of the town. As the rumble of the panzers grew louder, its heartbeat steady in his chest. The old strategies worked just as they had on countless battlefields before. Divide and conquer. He'd be the bait. The Germans would focus on him, giving Hamish the chance to slip around and strike their exposed sides. Behind him, Roland's vanguard lumbered into position, its towering frame silhouetted by smoke. The chainsaw mounted on its arm gleamed ominously. In close quarters, Roland's vanguard was a nightmare, a walking meat grinder, and the half-tracks that supported the panzers would never know what hit them. Sir William could hear the tanks now, the thrum of their engines reverberating in the ground beneath his feet, their weapons hummed with deadly promise. But it was already too late. Rocinante had drawn their eyes. A loud roar erupted from one of the cannons of the panzers, a deafening crack as it fired. The shot slammed into Rocinante's shoulder, throwing sparks as the heavy armor absorbed the hit. The mech staggered back, but it didn't fall. William's hand tightened around the controls as he pivoted Rocinante, making it appear weaker than it was. The panzer had just made the mistake of showing its hand. Here they come, Hamish. Rocinante can only take so much of this. Get in there as soon as you can. Roland, I need those half-tracks dealt with. On it, sir. The battlefield turned into chaos the instant the panzers roared to life, their heavy guns booming in rapid succession. Rocinante absorbed hit after hit, each strike a reminder of the firepower it was up against. But William didn't flinch. Every blow that landed only made him more determined. He gritted his teeth behind the visor, shouting into the mic. The ground shook as Roland's vanguard charged forward, its chainsaw arm spinning to life with a bone-chilling whine. The half-tracks attempted to move into position for another round of support fire, and were shredded in a matter of seconds. The Mech's chainsaw chewed through the vehicles with brutal precision, metal twisting and screeching as it tore through the German armor. Meanwhile, the panzers were focusing their fire on Rocinante, tracking the Mech's every movement. But that's what William had wanted. With each shot fired at him, the panzers were slowly being funneled into a death trap. He could already hear the engines of Hamish's mech, Longstrider, powering up, the old veteran positioning himself for the kill. William let his mech stumble again, luring the panzers into the open square. The streets of Glenmark were narrow, the perfect battleground for Rocinante's size and firepower. He triggered the release of his heavy-duty missiles, sending them straight for the advancing tanks. The explosion rocked the village as they detonated on impact, scorching the earth and sending debris flying in all directions. Yet, in the wake of the blast, the panzers were still closing in. But not for long. With a roar, Longstrider surged forward, its massive frame a blur of motion as it carved through the battlefield. The panzers were unable to quickly adjust. They found themselves flanked, One by one they fell, their engines sputtering to silence as Hamish's mech dished out devastating blows. Several minutes later, the battlefield was eerily quiet now, save for the distant echo of gunfire and the grinding of the last surviving German machines being crushed underfoot. The silence hung heavy in the air, the dust of the battle settling over the remains of the town. William leaned back in his seat, his mech standing tall amidst the wreckage. His lance had done their job. And now, with the German advance stopped for the moment, it was time to regroup. But he knew it was only a brief respite. The real fight was still to come. The world has been changed irrevocably by the advent of mechanized warfare. What began as a curious oddity in the midst of the Russo-Japanese War had slowly blossomed into one of the most powerful forces on the battlefield. The development of the first mechs, giant, heavily armored machines of war, began as a tentative experiment, a feat of engineering born from the ingenuity of European and Western powers. The concept spread slowly, but surely, catching fire in the rising tensions of the early 20th century. By the time of the Great War, mechs were a battlefield reality, and the nobility of Europe took them up as a tradition. To fight in a mech became an honor, a rite of passage for the elite, a symbol of power and prestige. Meanwhile, in Americas, the machines were adopted by elite military units, well-trained, aggressive, and highly efficient in their deployment. The British, the French, and the Americans used them with growing expertise, each nation refining their own design and tactics as the years wore on. However, in the East, the Russians took the technology in a different direction, seeing it as the perfect complement to their vast armies. They embraced the war machines, but at a slower pace under the Tsar. By the time the Second World War began, the Russians had finally caught up, deploying their own mechs with increasing frequency. In the brutal struggles of the Eastern Front. But it was Germany that took the world by surprise. They didn't just use mechs, they innovated. The Germans not only deployed an advanced fleet of mechs, but had begun to counter the technological dominance of other European powers with terrifying new weapons. Among these were genetically modified super soldiers, muscle-bound monstrosities capable of tearing apart infantry, and mechanized units with ease. But that was just the beginning. Germany also unleashed monstrous, mutated animals, specifically bred to hunt down enemy scouts and infiltrate the battlefield with uncanny efficiency. And in the skies, the Germans deployed the first advanced fighter jets, their speed and lethality unmatched by any force at the time. With the start of the Blitzkrieg, the British found themselves on the back foot, struggling to maintain their defenses against the overwhelming German advance. The British had delayed deploying their full force of mechs, known as lances, to defend the homeland, but with the help of the French and the Americans, who provided much-needed transport and reinforcement, the British had finally begun to turn the tide, gaining a brief respite from the German onslaught. Now, for the first time in years, they were able to go on the offensive. The immediate goal? Reclaim key territories and resources. Particularly, the critical industry sites that produce the parts necessary to build and maintain their mechs. Scotland, with its massive mech production yards, was one of the most crucial locations. If the Germans secured these yards, they could easily outproduce the British, crushing any hope of a counteroffensive. The British needed to retake these facilities, liberating not just Scotland, but their ability to wage war at all. It would be long, hard battles, but it was the only option left. The battle for the future of Europe and the world would be fought here, on the ruins of once proud cities, in the shadows of towering machines. The first objective, Scotland. The enemy was entrenched, and the battle for the industrial heart of Britain's future had begun. June 18th, 1940. 1400 hours. Outskirts of Inverness, Scotland. Marshlands near the reclaimed town perimeter. The ground squelched under heavy iron feet, as William and his battered lance trudged through the mire. The battle to liberate Inverness had cost them dearly. But for the first time in weeks, they had pushed the enemy back far enough to breathe. Now came the ugly part, holding ground, while their support crews worked to patch together what was left of their mechs. William's own machine, Rocinante, was limping badly. The left leg had taken a hard hit from the German Panzer shell during the last push, and now every step hissed steam and groaned like a dying beast. The others in his lance weren't faring much better. Visors cracked from lucky rifle shots, hydraulic lines leaking oil like black blood, and paint chipped so badly their once proud flags barely fluttered. But they were standing, for now. The crews worked fast, pulling scraps from the wreckage to slap on fresh armor plates and to keep the mechs mobile. Chatter echoed between them, half disbelieving talk that they'd made it this far, that maybe they'd get a night off to drink before the next fight. And then the gunfire started. Sharp cracks in the distance, barking, snarling. One of the crewmen, binoculars lifted, caught a round through the chest before he could even shout a warning. William didn't hesitate. His voice boomed over the field. "Mount up! Saddle up! They're coming!" Panic surged through the ranks. The worst possible timing. They were too far from the town, too exposed in this open marsh. The enemy had cover. Tall grass rippled ahead like waves, and William's stomach dropped. He knew that sound. Hellhounds. Dogs the size of tigers, pumped full of combat drugs until they were frothing berserkers. Their bodies were grotesque, a blend of flesh and steel. Rudimentary augments keeping them alive and vicious, and now they were free, caught on the scent of blood and fear. The support crews scrambled, trying to load up their jeeps and retreat. They weren't going to make it, not before the hounds closed in. William knew it. They all knew it. If the mechs didn't start up now, they'd be torn apart. Inside Rocinante, William flicked through the startup sequence, hand shaking. Nothing. The engine coughed and died. Again. Nothing. Panic clawed at his throat. Then the third time. The engine roared, pistons hissing, the frame shuddering to life as the cockpit vibrated under him. Thank God. The mech stood tall again, steam hissing from the damaged leg. William slammed the lever for the shoulder-mounted machine gun, and the weapon spat fire into the grass just as the first hellhounds broke cover. One fell with a yelp, but the others charged, heedless of the bullets chewing through them. Hardy bastards, meaner than anything natural. His squad's other mechs sparked to life. One by one, weapons barking and gears grinding. But there were so many. Too many. Some hounds slipped past the line, chasing down the retreating jeeps. The mud slowed everything. Vehicles bogged down while the monstrous dogs loped through like wolves on the hunt. The crews fired rifles in desperation against these beasts, but it was nothing. It was like throwing stones at a storm. William turned his mech, trying to cover the retreat, and something grabbed him. What the hell could have grabbed him? Rocinante stumbled, that bad leg nearly giving out as he caught sight of it. A creature, bigger than any man had any right to be. Muscle-bound, grotesquely swollen, its veins a sickly green. Pale skin stretched thin over metal plates and tubing that pulsed and hissed. Surgical scars and staples crisscrossed its body like some hellish patchwork. It ripped one of Rocinante's arm plates clean off. William tried to bring his mech arms up in defense, but the knee joint collapsed, dropping him lower just as the creature lunged, mud spraying with every heavy step. His machine gun flared, rounds slamming into the monster's torso, but they barely slowed it. With a snarl, it tore the weapon clean off Rocinante's shoulder and beat the mech's armor with it like a club, dents caving it with each brutal strike. The thing was too close, too strong. William's cannon was useless at this range, and every second it hammered at him, his armor weakened. He racked his brain, scrambling for options as alarms blared in his cockpit. Then came the scream of a chainsaw engine. A roar. A spray of hot fluid splattered across Rocinante's cockpit glass. The creature jerked, then split apart as the roaring chainsaw blade tore it in half, its bisected body tumbling into the mud in a heap of gore and metal. Roland's mech, Vanguard, stood over it, blades spinning and dripping smoke, curling from its vents. William sucked in a breath. No time to celebrate. The hounds were still out there. The fight wasn't over yet.